When we think about digital policy in the context of higher education, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? For some, it may be your learning management system or the use of virtual reality in some specialized courses. Probably many of you are thinking about artificial intelligence and how it can impact our research and how these are being carried out. Or maybe how your university can offer a fully online PhD program in the near future. Whatever it is, digital policy is usually associated with either those that affect teaching and learning, and to some extent research practices on the one hand, or to those that are associated with the university's long-term strategic directions, often linked to its vision and mission on the other hand. However, an overlooked aspect of digital policy is the role of technology in middle level decision making. Specifically, how higher education leaders like you and me view technology when we make critical choices and solve challenges in the short and medium term. Short talk is a meso level reflection or a mid range reflection of digital policy, particularly how it augments human decision making in the context of higher education institutions. I argue that digital policy should not be just about investing in high tech equipment, nor should it be only about the deployment of systems. Rather, digital policy should also be about how technology can transform decision making in higher education institutions into an efficient and agile process. About 6 years ago, when I was appointed as Associate Dean for graduate programs, I instinctively asked for all the data that the office could possibly provide me. I wanted to understand how I can perform my role as Associate Dean more effectively. More importantly, I would like to know how I may be able to dispense evidence based decision making in a more efficient manner. I soon realized that I expected too much too soon. As you can imagine, the data submitted was in different formats: PDFs, Excel, Word, hard copies, etc. To make it more complicated, these came from various sources that are not connected to each other. Many came from physical folders stuck in filing cabinets, some came from the different laptops of the staff, and then a few more were saved in the cloud. So, yes, I had data, but it was clunky, messy, static, and some I cannot even verify immediately. There was one time that I needed data from 10 years back, and it took one whole day for my staff to locate the correct folder, which was at the time already placed inside a box and was kept in storage in another room. That is 8 hours of work just trying to find a file in a storage room. I think most of you can relate to this. We know we have data, but we don't know if that data is reliable and also easily exportable. Worse, we do not know exactly where it is when we need it the most. We have since then used technology to leverage our own digital transformation. We have transitioned to a fully online graduate admissions process with AI-assisted test proctoring, automated our approval process for thesis, dissertation, and capstone projects, and cloud-based office records management system, to name a few. All of these are anchored on a digital policy that is framed along three principles: equity, transparency, and collaborative learning. Our decision to embrace technology predates the pandemic. This is linked to our desire to increase access and diversity in our student population because the majority of those who apply to our graduate programs are mid career professionals. Many of them experience geographic, financial, and even physical barriers that prevented them from pursuing graduate school, even if they wanted to. Hence, the very first digital policy we embraced relates to graduate school admissions. Replacing the pen and paper application process, including administering the graduate admissions test, was not a walk in the park. We made this decision 2 years before the pandemic. It was a time when technology seems to be a luxury for many higher education institutions. We had a vision. We wanted to make our admissions process equitable, but because there was not enough resources, we were given an old, underutilized portal to refurbish. It took us 2 years to develop the system, including adding an AI-assisted admissions test remote proctoring feature. We launched it barely a few months before the pandemic struck. It was not a perfect system, but at least it prevented massive disruptions in our admissions process at a time when many were at a loss. The second principle is transparency. Transparency is a key element in good governance, most especially in higher education. Resistance to change and reform is usually a byproduct of the opacity and highly centralized nature of decision making and leadership in general. The Philippines has implemented one of the most restrictive lockdown measures in the world during the COVID-19 pandemic. Schools and universities remained mostly shut for 2 years. Many of the support services, including administrative processes, were moved virtually, but with a lot of challenges and mistrust. For us, we realized early that we needed allies to ensure the efficiency of our virtual processes and effectiveness of our decisions. And the only way to do this is to share whatever information we have to our primary and secondary stakeholders so they too can understand why these decisions have been made. To do this, we set up our data management system, which allows us to generate and share up-to-date information that what we call is mission critical, such as admissions-related data, scholarship information, and monitoring students with special circumstances. This is complemented with a communication system that allows a two-way virtual feedback system between our office, other academic departments, graduate students, and academic staff. These empowered academic departments to decide how to address issues that are affected by the many seemingly sporadic changes in the public health and security landscape during that time. We figured since we do not have control over what the government will decide what to do next, at least we gain some control over information that will help us become more agile decision makers. Embracing technology in order to become more transparent resulted in two things. First, it developed the lifelong learning skills, such as digital literacy and communication skills, of our non teaching staff, who have since then pursued several capacity building activities even after the pandemic. And second, it deepened the trust between our team and our stakeholders, which further democratized the decision making process in middle management. The third principle is collaborative learning. The work of Chris Agiris is useful here when we think about how essential collaborative learning is in digital policy. There are two ways that organizations learn. First, single loop, or determining how certain decisions affect the outcomes. And second, double loop, or understanding how our assumptions affect the kinds of decisions we make, which ultimately affect the outcomes. For example, a less interactive class discussion session may have generated the teacher's interest to find a more suitable technology to facilitate better the next session. So this is single loop. A double loop learning would have the teacher look at whether he or she should be even doing class discussions in the first place. Maybe the course itself should be redesigned, not just a specific class activity. In digital policy, most of the decisions that happen at the meso level are products of double loop learning. We review our assumptions about our teaching, our research, and our community service activities and try to see if there are certain assumptions that need to be debunked. This is then complemented by the review of our individual and institutional mental models, not only about technology, but more importantly, where the human is located in the policy. The practice of collaborative learning, therefore, brings back the human person in the center of decision making concerning digital technology. More than just coming together to solve a problem, collaborative learning engages in double loop learning by challenging our own mental models and questioning the assumptions about the role of technology in higher education institutions. Digital policy is not something new. It is in fact a fundamental enabler of many organizations, including higher education, to address the rapid changes brought about by the Fourth Industrial Revolution. McKinsey and Company, a global management consulting firm, recently published a report that describes the post-COVID world as a world in flux. Flux is a word that is normally attributed to a constant oscillation between one state to another. It describes change, but change that is sudden and even at times violent. The pandemic indeed created so many life-altering changes that were so sudden on an individual and organizational level. So it is not surprising that these abrupt changes have brought the best and the worst in all of us. For a very long time, those in technology and policymakers operated in two different spheres inside the university. However, for higher education institutions to navigate changes successfully, behavioral and institutional barriers must be addressed. It is important, therefore, to understand that leveraging technologies to facilitate our university's needs, especially in a world of constant flux, must be respectful of our cultures as higher education. For digital policy to work, it requires a bottom-up approach and the involvement of many stakeholders. For us, we engage in technology because we would like to transform how we make decisions, most importantly, in the middle level of the organization. This meant that our digital policy should 1. Facilitate collaborative learning to increase transparency, 2. Support evidence-based policymaking, 3. Monitor the progress of our reforms, and 4. Measure impact of micro and macro digital policies. A university is in the end a learning community. We all know that knowledge cannot be taught. It must be developed together, even if we do not agree with each other. Technology can make the learning process more engaging, more meaningful, more democratic. Decision-making processes can actually be enhanced by the very same technologies we use in our classrooms and laboratories. So I end this reflection by quoting Einstein. He said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them."